The Growing Up Brooklyn podcast is a Black Pharaoh Gaming production.
Welcome to the Growing Up Brooklyn podcast. I'm your host, Coach Ty. And on today's episode, I have another very special guest, somebody that I've known way back. You may have seen me talk about 273. And that tells you just how long I've known
Yes.
this young lady. We go back like throwbacks. Somebody that I've definitely grown and have the utmost respect for. Not only did I respect her in the streets, but I respect her personally because in the streets. So, and I told her I had a couple of stories to tell real quick, but there were
Ty,
a few.
already? Already, Ty,
Listen, yeah,
already?
already. Listen. With this, I'm speaking my truth. I'm speaking
Yes,
my
sir.
truth.
Yes, sir.
They were very so growing up in the projects. You always had people that could handle themselves, can throw hands, and there was very few people that nobody went to test, and she was one of them young ladies that whether you was a guy or a girl, you ain't go test her. You ain't want no parts of her in the streets, and she wasn't a bully. She didn't go looking for trouble, but if it came and found her, I do remember a little situation she had, and she kind of handled somebody. We won't throw no names out there, but she handled somebody. And from that point on, I was like, I am never messing with that young lady in my life. Have again the utmost respect for her family. Family's always been cool. Siblings, know her siblings well, so shout out to her siblings. But I want to welcome to the podcast Miss Darlene Anderson.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Ty. Hey, family. That was a warm welcome. I try to run away from
Listen,
some of those stories, but you know what? Your
no, listen.
foundation is your foundation, right?
Yeah, listen, I was scared of you. I ain't gonna lie. I ain't never messed with your brothers and none of them because I ain't one, and I wasn't a bully. And your brothers, of course, were mad cool, and we all pop junk and talk friendly junk.
Hmm.
And your youngest brother, when I found out who his big sister was, I was like, "Oh, that's your sister? Oh, no, we good, man. Now, I ain't talking no smack to you." So I just wanted to kind of tease you on that. But again, you are an entrepreneur, author. Like you've accomplished so much, and we were kind of talking off air, about where we came from and how good everybody's doing and everything like that. So again, shout out to you and a testament to you that where we come from does not define who you are. So I definitely want to give you your flowers with that for sure.
Absolutely. I
But I want to,
appreciate you for that.
no, you're welcome. But I want to open up with the first question I ask everybody. Can you share with us your earliest memory of growing up Brooklyn?
Absolutely. My earliest memories, I mean, it would have to be when I was probably under two, around one and change. My mother grew up, born and raised in Fort Greene, downtown Brooklyn, and my father
Mhm.
was from Bedford-Stuyvesant. So when they got married at the age of 21 and 23, they were still figuring things out. And I was going from Fort Greene to Bedford-Stuyvesant to see my grandparents, my aunts, my uncles, my siblings. So my fondest memories would be Fort Greene. Um,
It's
Jams.
okay.
I know a lot of people don't remember Jams, but I'm talking about the early 80s Jams, great summertime. When you think about Fort Greene and even Bedford-Stuyvesant, East New York, you think about a lot of crime, poverty, that
Mhm.
those weren't my memories. I remember good times in Fort Greene every summer going down. And then I remember Bedford-Stuyvesant hanging out with my grandfather in the barbershop, of course, as older OGs do, right? I remember being in the barbershop with him and his friends and just enjoying life. I remember summer days, having a good time, and community was community. Everybody knew you, everybody was familiar with you. That's what I remember.
Yeah, and one thing I tell people, and like you said, our area in East New York and Boulevard House, was a family element, and
Exactly.
we came up with respect that you didn't disrespect nobody's moms. You know what I'm saying? Like these kids today, they have like no respect. They just like I even got to correct some of my basketball plays, and they be like, "Well, I saw so and so name." I'm like, "No, Miss so and so. Like Miss Darlene, not Darlene." Like these kids just just have no respect, and it's like come on, like we got to do better. Like our generation, we have to do better to instill values in these kids. But yeah, but
Exactly.
but it's funny, Fort Greene Jams and that big old park. So I went to Brooklyn Tech, and that so I'm very familiar with Fort Greene Park. So, um, So again, coming up, tell me some of the things that you just loved about Fort Greene Park, real quick. Just going
It
off
was
subject.
So when you mentioned no one messed with me, well, later on in life, especially junior high school, I did get messed with. That was a whole different thing. That was like, I didn't even know it was a different side of the hood until I went to Gershwin and it was all of the different projects and you got a different sense of life. So we're going to get into that. But what I remember about Fort Greene and Bedford-Stuyvesant was that it was, you had to really, so you mentioned nobody messed with me. And one of the things that I learned earlier on was you don't go looking for trouble, but you defend yourself when you have to. My aunts, my
Right.
uncles, they didn't play that. It was a generation of if you fought, it was fair. You better not come upstairs unless you did your very best, and you don't have to win. But if I heard you ran, it was going to be a problem. That's when my aunt would take you back outside and you sure enough gonna defend yourself. And it was the same thing with my father growing up in Bedford-Stuyvesant. It was a little different because that was, the brownstones. They really weren't doing a lot of
Right.
fighting and stuff then. So it was just really just hanging out outside. Before Green, definitely you're gonna learn. And between my aunt and my cousins, I definitely learned to defend myself. And then by the time
Right.
I lived in Boulevard since 1975, I moved there when I was 2 months old, but I spent a
Right.
lot of time in Fort Greene and in Bedford-Stuyvesant. So as I got older and fights would happen, I would defend myself. I wouldn't look for it like you said, but I'm definitely going to defend myself. So I remember a lot of those fights, but I also remember hanging outside late at night, Fort Greene and Boulevard, hanging outside
Hmm.
late at night until 2, 3 o'clock in the morning with your
Yeah.
parents playing, double dutch.
Hmm.
I never knew how to jump. Please don't judge me, sisters. I wasn't a jumper. I was a turner. So I'm turning. I'm turning for dear life, but just really playing on the monkey bars, being kids, not having to worry about
Yeah.
anything except being youthful. So those are my fondest memories.
Yeah, yeah. So, like I said, shout out to Fort Greene. Like I said, I had a lot of good times down there going to Brooklyn Tech. So when you said it, I just wanted you to dive in a little bit, into Fort Greene because a lot of people again hear a lot of bad. Fort Greene when we were growing up actually had a bad reputation that it probably didn't deserve, and because of the rich history of Fort Greene, definitely wanted you to give that showed them some love. So
Definitely,
how has
definitely.
Brooklyn changed since your childhood? Like, what are the most noticeable differences that you've seen, in the changes of Brooklyn?
Community, not a sense of unity, so to speak. I have been out of New York for 3 years, but my family is there. So I go back from time to time, especially I assist in the care of my mom. And it's different. Every time I get, no matter what bridge I'm taking, Ty, to get into New York, as soon as I get past that bridge, and I know people looking at this can relate, I'll be listening to my gospel. I'm like, yes, Jesus, I love you. By the time I get to that bridge, I'm like DMX, Jay-Z, what's going on? I'm just, cause everything it's just so much going on.
Right.
I feel like I gotta defend myself between the driving and then people just doing whatever. So it's changing to the point of it's very congested now. It's really
Yeah.
congested. Outside of that, community is not the same anymore. But then it's depending on where you go because I can still go back to Boulevard and I'll see young ladies that I helped to raise. They're now
Right.
married and they're mothers and they have their
Hmm.
families. But then I will see generations that have moved in thereafter and you can literally see the difference in the two. They'll be like, "Hey, Miss
Yeah.
Darlene, how you doing?" Whereas the other generations, they're like, "Oh, I'm just doing my thing, whatever. I don't want to speak to nobody or do anything." So that's
Right.
really a
Right.
difference too. Outside of the congestion, it is the community and the unity.
So, and speaking of Boulevard, what do you think about all the changes that have gone on around Boulevard? Like now, Boulevard being private. Also, they have the Prince Joshua Center that they built that
Yes,
used to be the
yes,
old
yes.
abandoned parking lot. So what do you think about some of the changes that they've even made, close to home for us in Boulevard?
Hmm. Well, I think those changes are definitely for the better, but I do, whenever I see those changes, like for example, the community center, PJ's community center, and just
Hmm.
acknowledging, his memory, amazing young
Yeah.
individual and his family. respecting to his family, and then looking at the amazing things that the agencies are doing, the community-based agencies, Man Up, that actually played
Yeah.
a part in that, and I think Canvas there as well. So to see these entities come into the community to help lift it up more, it's a beautiful thing. But we had that, and I know we're going to talk about that, but we had that in summer camp. We had that in after school. We had a lot of great CBOs. We didn't look at them as CBOs. We just looked at them like Miss Hill from the after school programs.
Yeah. I was
Yeah,
just
and
talking about her.
yes, in
Yes.
the community center, I loved her. Amazing. You think about Mr. Hanbury, who gave us African dance.
Yes.
Lawrence Hanbury.
Lawrence
So
Hanbury. Yeah.
exactly, I loved him. He helped us learn more culture outside of just being African Americans. He taught us what it was to be African in a sense, with dance, with music, things of that nature. So I appreciated him for that. But seeing those changes, it makes me feel good because it's needed. But I don't know how much people are utilizing them the way they should. Yeah.
Yeah, and part of and I spoke about I got another show that I did, Breaking the Cycle, and I was just talking to the author about how people just don't know how to break cycles, and it's and for us to go back to Boulevard, and we see it here and there, and then you see some people are still like stuck in that rut, but the resources that we had were amazing. And and you talked about Mr. Hanbury, and I want to talk about the Reach Out program where where we were campers there together, and and you talked about Mr. Hanbury, but tell me how what Reach Out meant to you. Like my aunt Phyllis worked there. My aunt, for those that may remember, my aunt Phyllis was the white lady that worked there, and everybody looked at her like, "That's your aunt?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's my aunt. She's married to my uncle. Her cousins, her daughters, and my mom were first cousins, and but she was a white woman giving back to the community." I can't remember the other lady that used to run it. She was a white woman as well. So you had these people that gave back into the community. But my aunt lived in the community. She lived in 570 Stanley. But tell me about what Reach Out meant to you, and that how that helped shape you. Even diving back into Mr. Hanbury.
Yes, definitely. I forgot that, but I remember it now that you mentioned it. I do remember that was your aunt. Yes, sir. And I
Yeah.
remember you and your siblings and us going away like on trips outside of New York. I'm back in school for my master's in mental health counseling to become a mental health clinician. And I took a class on stages of development, and that's from conception to death. And one of the things we had to do was papers on what it was like, our earliest memories, as you just referenced, but then also what growing up was like for us in our community, similar to what you just asked. And I put Reach Out in my paper, just thinking
Wow.
back to going on trips every week, and not just
Yeah.
any trip. We just didn't do swimming. We just didn't do the movies, but they took us to, I believe, DC, if my memory serves me
Yeah.
correctly.
No, we went to
We went
DC.
on
Yeah.
plays. We went to other places. I can't remember
Pennsylvania.
all
We
of
went to
those.
Amish country.
Yes,
We
we
went to
did.
Amish country in
I
Pennsylvania.
remember that.
Yeah.
Yes, we did all
Yeah.
of these things where it's like, wow, we're able to get up and go out of our communities, out of our states, and just learn more. That was important to me. So I look forward to going to Reach Out every year. I think I went around 2 or 3 years. I really
Yeah.
appreciated that. Mr. Hanbury was a whole nother beast. Mr. Hanbury. So, because I did African in junior high. I
Hmm.
auditioned for it and I did it. And I was very awkward growing up as it related to dancing. And now that I'm older, I think a lot of it had to do with maybe some spine problems that I had, flexibility things. I remember my mother, maybe you guys can relate to this, the orthopedic shoes growing up, my mom had for me from everybody knew a Dr. Griffith, the orthopedic doctor that's going to prescribe these shoes for you, right? I
That's
didn't wear
right.
mine. And I think thinking back at it now in retrospect, maybe I should have. So that being stated, I really didn't have much flexibility in doing different things and my coordination was off, but he challenged me to do more. And I always remember I
Right.
could never be in the front. You're not going to be in the front and come out doing your dances, but you're going to have an opportunity. I even remember a lot of girls getting mad because they're like, she can't get the dance steps. Like, we don't want her in it. And he was like, no, she's going to be
No.
in it. He challenged me to just do my very best work out, and just, again, do my best. And I remember that about him. Always just do your best. And that's all I ask of you. I appreciate him for that.
Yeah, and shout out to I don't know if he's still around. I hope he is. But shout out Mr. Hamburg because I believe he moved to Florida, and it was just such a big loss. And like when they said that he didn't like the next year when we went back, and he said, and I remember, oh, I can't remember her name. It was Zachary Num's mom worked there.
Yes,
Um,
Miss Smith.
oh, can I remember?
Miss Smith.
Miss Smith. Yes, yes,
Shout out
yes,
to Miss
yes, yes.
Smith. Miss Smith was
Shout out
amazing.
Miss Smith. Yeah, yeah. And but when she said he wasn't coming back, it was like a loss to the community.
It
Like
was. It
you
was.
wouldn't like typically, a person moves and it's like, oh, they moved, but like when he left, it was a loss to the community. So again,
Yep.
shout out to Mr. Hanberry, teaching us about our African roots and teaching us. I used to play the drums a little something, but that
Hmm.
was because of
I
him.
remember. I
So
remember.
it's definitely a shout out to him and people like him who definitely shaped our community. So
Yes, yes.
um,
And Ty, he also, if you remember, we traveled a lot with him. He made a lot of papers, local and outside of our community. Like, he made sure that the African American children were identified, not just because it was a program like in a impoverished community, but that these were real
mhm,
professionals. These kids had real talent. And I really appreciate him about that. He's like, I want you to look at them as who they are, dancers and musicians, not like they're from impoverished communities. And the people that did the drums and everything, you guys went in. It was
yeah,
amazing to
yeah.
see you all do your solos and stuff. So yes,
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Thank you for that. I want to step back a couple of years earlier, back to 273. Now, I got one other story I want to share with everybody.
oh my
Okay,
God,
and this is funny. So I talked recently about Miss Jones. Rest in peace to Miss Jones, our beloved principal for
yes,
273. Your mom was the only person I seen check Miss Jones. No lie. No lie. And I held on to these stories on purpose because I wanted you
yes,
to absorb them firsthand. But your mom was the only person I've ever seen check Miss Jones. And not to say that your mom was wrong. And of course I was a kid and don't know the situation, but when your mom came up, Miss Jones was like, I just saw a whole different person. So I wanted to share that real quick. But let's talk about 273. Beloved, tell me some of the teachers you remember, some of the favorite times you had. But let's start with some of the your favorite teachers that you remember coming
I
up in
will, I will,
273.
I will. I will say this though, before I jump into that, if I can. If my friends are watching this from like my teenage to adult life years, I still to this day tell stories about my mom and they just laugh. Like they see my mother where she is now because even in
Right.
her stages of Alzheimer's, she's still like, my mother's a
No
lot. She
joke.
don't play. She will be like, do you need me? I will put my stuff on and I will come right now. No one messes with my children. I'm like, Mom, I'm a whole
That's right.
adult. I'm fine. But I make jokes and I always say when my mother came onto the school, Miss Jones is like, instead of saying from lean on me, when he goes, get those chains off the door. I said Miss Jones would be like, get them chains on the door. Brenda's coming, Brenda Anderson's coming, get them chains on the door. My mother did not play when it came to her
Ah,
kids, as
mm-mm.
you said, and
That's
I
right.
love her for that. And as her helping in her care now, we those stories help me to make sure I'm reminded of what she did for me and why I
Yes.
have to ensure that I am doing, even more for her and covering her in this time. So yes, yes.
Right.
So 273. Miss Jones, definitely. I know everybody will say that their principal was the best, but our principal was really the best. She loved
Yes.
us. She treated us like we were her own children, literally bringing us into her bosom. She
Yes.
really, like all of the time, you're going to get a hug from Miss Jones. You're going to
Yes.
remember her for the rest of your life. She
Hmm.
smelled amazing and she was a
Yeah.
great educator. She educated with
Yes.
love. I
Yes.
remember those things. And even now, when we talk about how second languages have been removed from school, I just told someone yesterday, I said, it's a shame that I did Spanish, don't judge me,
Mm.
from first grade to 12th grade.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
Me
probably
too.
can't speak more than a paragraph. I wish I would have known then how important it
Right.
was now. We didn't take it seriously. I love Miss Ramos. when
Oh,
she
I couldn't
came
remember
in.
her name. Thank you. I could not remember her name.
Miss
And I was talking to
Ramos,
my people's Miss Ramos.
Miss
Yes.
Ramos, Miss Ramos. My mother had a run-in with Miss Ramos as well. Jesus. So I remember Miss Ramos with teaching us the different. Now I might not be able to speak Spanish, but I
Mhm.
definitely understand a lot more about the countries as a
Yeah.
result of the books, the coloring books that we had. And when we sat
Hmm.
down and did those tests, I remember that chorus. I remember chorus and it just
Chorus.
being so much fun and the unity every week and the singing. I had great
Oh
memories
yeah.
from that. And also, one of my teachers, and I really got upset with him, and they were like, well, Darlene, everybody didn't have your upbringing. Some people really lived in poverty, even though, you were in poverty. It's different types of poverty. And I said, I understand that. I told them, they said, well, some people didn't have opportunity to go to school and, even
Right.
in elementary school, teachers didn't care. I said, my teachers cared. We had a very diverse
Yes.
staff. And the teachers, the
Yes.
white teachers in my school used to come to my house to watch the soap operas during their lunch break and chill with my mother. Like this, they wanted to watch All My Children. They wanted to catch Luke and
Hmm.
Laura. That was what
Oh,
growing up
look.
and going to 273 meant to me. They're too old to get anybody in trouble now.
Nah, nah, nah. And like I said, and like you said, we had, I remember when the black teachers there were kind of the minority. So again, we had, a lot of, white women and men that came into our neighborhoods and but cared. Like today, like, I coach basketball at a school and teachers quit like it's nothing. Like we just had a teacher at the school, English teacher, just walk out and quit. And it's like,
Mhm.
they never did that when we was kids.
No,
Like you never saw teachers quit. So, again, shout out to all those teachers, that came through the years at 273. Um, like I said, I'm trying to, oh, there was a story I had in my head. It slips my mind now, but it'll
another
come
one
back to me.
about me beating somebody up, Ty,
No, it
maybe.
wasn't. No, 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 no. Listen, it's like I said, I remember you had to fight with somebody, and I'm not going to shout out the name, and you just went to town. And like I said, when I found out like I said, your two younger brothers, when I found out who they were related to, because again, like I said, they're a little younger than me, but again, we walking down, across the street, and we're walking down towards the middle of the project, and they're talking smack and friendly, respectful. We talking trash. Like, wait, that's your sister? Nah, I'm good. Like specifically your youngest brother. I never talk trash to him ever again. Never, even in adulthood, I never talk trash to him.
So
Nah,
things are
shout
a
out
little
to him
different now. What I found was, and then boys were just being boys.
though. Yeah,
So the
yeah,
way that they showed attention, then, I didn't take it as they like me. I took it as, they were just disrespecting me. It's funny because two stories. Well, one, and he's passed away, but he wouldn't mind me sharing the story. We're talking about this. Daryl, and he was a comedian, so he always talked about this. Daryl kept messing with me, and he was so much bigger than me. And I kept saying all the
hmm
time, leave me alone, leave me alone. And he just kept poking with me. So, and I guess that was his expression of like. So we're walking outside. We were in third grade, Mr. Diamond's class. I never forget this. And I got my sister. I was responsible for my sister every day. So I get my sister and we're walking home and we're right there at Workman, right there at the street, and Jerome. And I
Right.
said, I told you to
Berkeley
leave me
Jerome, yeah.
alone. And I took my sister, I put it to the side. And when I tell you, I commenced to going in on him. And at the time, we were around the same size. He could have been like a couple of
Right.
inches taller than me, but I go in on him and I whip his butt. And now we're adults and he's towering me. And he's always like, that's the only person in life that ever beat me up. And she was a girl. He was a girl. And I always laugh at it. But the funny thing is, the next day I felt myself that day, and I said, well, I'm gonna come back the next day. Now I'm gonna bully him. And I came back the next day, and I attempted to bully him because I was mad because he kept bullying me. And my
Right.
mom had come up to the school, and of course, as only my mom could do, she put it on me and let me know that bullying was not allowed. So you
Right.
won the first day. That's it. We're not gonna bully him. That's the end of it. So yeah, pretty much. Uh,
Yeah, rest in
Definitely
peace to
true.
Darryl. I looked him up, and when you said the name, that's exactly who the person I was thinking of when you said that. So
It was
rest in
Daryl.
peace. Yeah, that was the same. Yeah, that was the same person. He used to live in he lived in High Boulevard. I think he lived in High Boulevard for a little bit
Hmm.
before he moved. So he was always cool too. Always cool.
He was a sweetheart. I think he was a DJ. In our adult life, we connected a lot. I did a couple of
Mhm.
barbecues with Daryl. He invited me to. He was really an amazing, like teddy bear. Really cool guy.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, he was a guy. For you to even say that you was in a fight with him, just me remembering him being a year older than me, like he was just mad. He was just mad cool. I used to play Skelly with him all the time,
Hmm.
across the street. So, like I said, when you said it, when I went and looked back and looked him up, I was like, oh, like it hurt because I hadn't talked to him in years, but just the childhood memories, and
Yeah.
I was glad that you was able to share that. Though he was like he was definitely a good guy, definitely
Yes,
a good
he
guy.
was. He was.
All right. So, can you recall any particular challenges or obstacles you faced while growing up in Brooklyn, and how did you overcome them?
So I guess it would be the transition from innocence and childhood to realizing that we do live in Parvish. We do live in a Parvish. And I'm gonna say it one more time. I'm sorry, you'll fix that, right?
No, you're fine. You're fine. You're
Yes.
fine.
We did live in a Parvish community to the degree of I started being more conscientious of what alcoholism was, what drugs
Right.
were, what gang violence was, that there were different levels of poverty. And even though I grew up as a welfare kid, like my grandparents on both sides were working individuals. My mother and
Right.
father moved to Boulevard because it was low income housing. But then my father
Yeah.
had taken ill, very ill. My father got hit by a train in the 80s, and this made the paper and
Wow.
everything. He had just gotten promoted from a store he was working at as a manager. They
Mhm.
went out, had a couple of drinks. Unfortunately, he's at the train station. He doesn't see the train coming in, and the train came in and pulled him on his sheepskin coat, and he got caught under. Praise God, it
Yeah.
didn't really kill him. Of course, he lived many of
Right.
years
Right.
later,
Right.
but it damaged his
Yeah.
leg tremendously to the point where he couldn't work. They have 4 children that are like steps, so that's where the public assistance came into play.
Right.
And just growing up, having minimal, but having enough, and then understanding what it was like to be told no of certain things. We got most of what we wanted, but being told no to certain things, that, and you couple that with just growing up and then heading into junior high school. And although there's other things before junior high school, but junior high school was it was like a culture shock on a lot of different levels, where you're seeing that Boulevard is not the only community in the world. You walk through these
Right.
projects with your family going maybe to Pennsylvania Avenue or different things like that,
Right.
or across the Boulevard. But you really didn't know about Linden. You didn't know about Penn Workman. You didn't know about the other side of the Boulevard unless you had family
Mhm.
in those communities. And I didn't have family at the
Right.
time in those communities. So once I got to Gersh, I'm like, wow, this is a whole new life. And by that time, you see the gangs, you see people getting
Yeah.
killed, and it was really silent. It was not really silent. It was spread out. But then it just started
Mhm.
happening more and more and more. And then the,
Right.
the crack coming in. So all of that and being outside and seeing the little crack vials on the ground. So those were all shocks for me and the reality of growing up on a different level.
Yeah, and I was on I was on a podcast about a month ago for somebody from ironically across the boulevard, and we was talking about our Gershwin experience, how you had 273, 306, and 218 feeding into Gersh, and like you said, it was just a whole different world. Now I had family, my mom lived in Penn Workman, so I was familiar with Penn Workman, but when you went across the boulevard, it was like it was almost like moving on up like that, but to them, you know it was a struggle. Like we looked at them like you would have thought that they were high middle class because it was all houses over there for the most part, and we were in the projects. But for them that lived over there, they were like, nah, like we struggled just as much as y'all did. Like you just didn't see it because we
Correct?
were in these houses, but it was a lot of Section 8 and everything that went on that side that we didn't see.
Yes.
So
Yeah. Yeah. And then it was a street,
so
Ty, different streets, because you could be
yeah,
on like was it, I think Bradford, which was
Bradford,
maybe
yeah.
a better block, or be on
Hmm.
Barbie across from the boulevard, or Warwick across from the boulevard. But then you had
Hmm.
Miller, you had those
Yeah,
blocks where it's like you're not even walking on those blocks if you are from Boulevard or even maybe Linden,
right,
unless you knew somebody and you was about that life. Like nobody was walking on those blocks. That's when I became more
right.
conscientious of just walk down Ashford all of the
Yeah,
time.
stay in
So
your lane. Yeah,
exactly,
no, stay in your
exactly.
lane. So let's talk about some of our favorite foods growing up. I tell people all the time, I am from the free lunch era. I'm actually going to get that put on a T-shirt that's going to say I'm from the free lunch era because I used to go to free lunch every summer like it was clockwork. We went to breakfast, we went to lunch, and if lunch was good, we might walk down to Gersh, and if it was even better, we might walk over to 306. But I put up a post about Ernie's, growing up with Ernie's Pizza. But so what was some of what was some of your favorite eating spots around Brooklyn
That is
or
a
New York
great
City in
question.
general?
Yes, yes. So Ernie's right here, we're talking about on Stanley, right here across from
Yes.
the church.
Yes. Well,
Yes. Okay.
down the street from St. Paul's, yes.
I'm going to tell you a story about that. I was in the Bronx for a couple of years before I moved to Jersey, and I run into this Italian young girl, beautiful girl, and she and I strike up a conversation, and we start talking about our upbringing, and she's talking about her family, I'm talking about my family, and then I'm like, wow, things are just not the way they used to, and I start talking about Boulevard and where I grew up, and she's talking about where her family worked, and I'm like,
Hmm.
we used to have the meat house. We used to have the record store. We had all of these amazing things right there on Stanley Avenue. And then I was like, the pizza shop, that guy, I loved him for many a year. She's like, that's my father. I said, what? She's like, that's my
Wow.
father. Like, it was just, that was a part of my culture, my history. I don't think that I will ever eat pizza like his pizza shop. It was a place to go to chat with your friends. Of course, after school, he'd be like, y'all get your stuff and go. Y'all not chilling out here. Get your stuff and go. And then a young guy that worked there for a long time as well, for many years.
Tiny. I think
Yes,
it's Tiny, and I forgot the other guy's name. There's another. I know you told the guy from Linden. I remember him too.
yes, yes. Those were memories for me. As far as the free lunch goes, I never really did like the hamburgers. I didn't like the hamburgers and the fries. I look forward to chicken. I look forward to the hot dogs. I love the chocolate milk, things like that. It
Yes.
just going in the summer. When summer came, it was a wrap. When summer came, we
Yeah.
all got excited and we look forward to just going every day and just being together. So those are some of my memories. As far as eateries throughout Brooklyn, Junior's, of
Mhm.
course, which is not even
Oh
what it
yeah.
used to
Well,
be
yeah. I
anymore.
mean, I went to Brooklyn Tech. I was right down the street from Junior's.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Junior's, and then the restaurant, of course, was it Beefsteak Charlie's? Was it Beefsteak
The
Charlie's?
one
I
right
can't.
right the one right by the D train, right
Yes.
there underneath the.
Yeah.
It was something. It was something else before or after it was Beefsteak Charlie's. But it was one of the chain restaurants that was there right
Yeah.
when you go downstairs for the D train, right across from LIU. I remember that.
I remember that. And then, I remember walking past LIU saying one day I'm going to go there when they had the tennis court on the side, and it was just
Hmm.
people wearing high, like, Nike socks and short shorts and all that. So I was like, I'm going to go there one day. I remember that. Also the Chinese restaurant on Myrtle, which is now like a big chain and everybody swears by it.
Yeah, yeah, I remember that. I've gone there. I've gone there a couple of times. I actually remember that because it had a big famous name and everybody used to go there.
I know my dad is in his grave rolling over now, like, you better get this right. He would always drive me
It was
there.
right across the street. It was right across the street from the 'cause the co-op. My
Was
cousin
it
lived in the
Come
co-op
Chow?
across the street from there.
Was it Come Chow?
Compound. Yes, that sounds about right.
It might be. I don't. Your
We have to
viewers will
Google
let
it.
us
We'll
know
Google
if
it
it's
and
not
we'll put it in.
right.
Yeah, and if you guys are watching this and you remember the name of that Chinese restaurant, definitely put it in the comments. I can see it. I can't remember it.
Yeah.
I can see
Albee
it.
Square Mall. You say Albee Square
Oh,
Mall now. They're like Albee Square Mall. What? going to Albee Square Mall in the basement with all of the eateries as
Mm-hmm.
well. I remember
Mm-hmm.
that. Just really just the old Brooklyn that honestly, unless you're like a 70s baby or older, you don't even know about. But I remember
You have
those
no
times.
idea what we're talking about.
Yeah, a time
Oh,
when you could eat a hot dog from a cart. You couldn't pay me to do it today, but even then, coming down Fulton Avenue.
I ain't gonna lie. If I went back, I haven't been back to New York in a couple of years, but I would still get a chicken over rice. I can't do a hot dog. It'll be hard for me. Not because I still love hot, but the chicken over rice, I'm gonna have to catch that guy early before I think he may have had to go to the bathroom or not.
Yeah, the gyro spot on Bridge. Is it Bridge? Is it Bridge or Hoyt? I don't even eat gyros anymore, but everybody swore by that. It was a gyro spot where they have Bridge Street used to be where they have all of the sewing things. You go and you get the patterns and the fabrics and
The
everything.
garment
The
area,
garment, yeah,
yeah,
the
yeah,
garment shop.
yeah.
It was a gyro place right there, and everyone loved. When you went downtown, you had to get a gyro. I remember that as
Yo,
well.
for sure. So tell me about some of the like any do you recall any like traditions, anything that growing up Brooklyn, like there were certain things that your family maybe did every year, growing up
hmm
Brooklyn?
hmm Well, between my family and the community, right? So with my family in the community, and I don't see this as much, but then I'm not there. So it may be happening in different communities. I'm just not seeing it. But even how we used to do like Boulevard Day. It
Yeah,
used to be different. It was more community oriented. Everyone would have their tents. They would set up a DJ. It wasn't just in Fort Greene that they were doing this. They were doing this in Boulevard as well. They would have a
right.
tent. Shout out to Mike. Mike used to do that as we got older. Mike, and shout out to his family. But then there was always different DJs, and we would have like these dance contests, and we would practice for this. My sister and her friends would practice for it way in advance and get ready for
Hmm.
it. And then our families will come together and have these barbecues. And I see as I'm driving through just the communities in the summertime, I see it still happening, but it doesn't look like it's to the magnitude of how we used to do it. You can knock on your neighbor's door and ask for sugar. You can
Yeah,
ask for bread. You can go and trust that your neighbor would take care of your kids and they would be fair and treat them like they would treat their own. Like those are times that I remember. I remember my dad doing the Boy Scout with my brothers and dressing up like
wow.
Santa Claus and just really ensuring that they had a good time. Like I remember those events during the holidays and stuff. And holidays, even for me and my siblings, kind of look different from what it did when we were younger. And sometimes I sit back, I'm like, oh man, I remember those days. I wish we could go back to it. But people have their lives and different things, and times are changing post COVID. But it was just really important then. As it relates to traditions, it's funny because when I think of traditions, I also, for some reason, think of cleanliness and just making sure, like you said, with the man you want to go before he went to the bathroom. I was I was here, as you can see, I'm at a hotel. I'm in travel for work and stuff, and
Mhm.
we were downstairs, and this lady was talking to me, and she leaned over my food, and a gentleman that was sitting next to me, he got so upset. He was like, "Why is she leaning over your food?" And she stays at the hotel, so she had on, her casual gear. He was like, "She doesn't even look like she's changed today. Why is she leaning over your food?" And I said, "It's okay." But I laughed because he reminded me if my dad was alive, he would be my dad's age. And my dad
Right.
would always talk about when it comes to food, being clean, don't talk over his food,
Yeah.
make sure you wash your hands. You can't even come and make food for him if you are not dressed. You can't roll out of the bed and come and touch his food. You better make sure you completely groom before you make anything for him. We had to get up Saturday mornings. We had to clean. We had to do
Yeah.
stuff before we went outside. Nowadays, you can't tell these kids, like in certain families, you can, but for the most part, these children don't know about getting up and cleaning the house on Saturday before you go outside, and not just your room. You help with the entire house, like
Entire
the
house.
entire house. So those were some traditions that I still hold near and dear to my heart. Sometimes my daughter looks at me and she's like, Is it that serious? Yes, it is that serious. I've come from an era where we had to scrape the grease off of the stove with a butter knife. That's the era that I come from. So when I tell you to clean the stove, and if I'm not telling you to use a butter knife, you having a good day, clean the stove. So those are just some of the
Exactly.
traditions, like what being clean was like for us growing up domestically than what it is for some people today.
Yeah, and you touch upon, your family element, and like I said, your parents were, your mom is and your dad was, great people in the community. What was one of the biggest takeaways that, the thing? So what was the one thing that they instilled in you that you still carry with you today?
Try your best. Like it's saying with Mr. Hanbury, it's like failure is never an option. Sometimes I think that my father was too hard on me. May he rest in peace, because I was his firstborn girl that,
Right.
should have been maybe his boy, right? So he loved me just the same, but when I think about my upbringing, I definitely understand how I am the woman that I am today, and how some people might say that that's like an alpha woman thing. And some people will say also that women learn how to be alpha women and they get certain things from their moms and their grandmothers, maybe, but that's not the case. There's a percentage of us where our fathers have raised us
Right.
to be really, really strong women. And my dad was the type, I always tell this story of how he was teaching me how to ride a bike and I wasn't getting it. And he starts yelling at me. We used to live in 2156. So we're like right there at the nursery at
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
2156. And he's like, come on, ride this bike, pedal, 1 foot, 2 foot, 1 foot, 2 foot, ride this bike, come on. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna learn how to ride this bike because I can't take this man yelling at me anymore. And I got an attitude and I took that bike and I held it and I rode it. Whereas you might have Bill Cosby with his daughters and he's like, come on, you can do it, ride the bike. I was like, that's not my upbringing at all. He just really was, you gotta do your best. It's no excuses, like grind. And that's how I am today. Even with the roller skating, he used to be like, 1 foot, 2 foot, roll, roll, roll. And I learned that way. So it was just consistency. And although I don't agree with this that he used to teach me, so I learned later on that that doesn't always work. Like he would always say, fake it till you make it, right? Fake it till you make it, which
Yes.
people still may say that as well. And I come to learn that it's a mindset. But even in that mindset, you do have to be honest. Like he was the type of person, he'd be like, look, you need a reference? Call your aunt and your uncle. Make sure they put it down. You worked with them for 6 months, 7 months, a year. That's what you're going to say. I've learned that doing that doesn't always yield the best results. Honesty is the best policy, but you should always aspire for what you want and believe that you can go for it and you're capable of getting it, even if it's the first time. So he instilled that in me a long time ago.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, you just know some people are alphas from the start, and I'm gonna make fun of you a little bit, but you just knew you from the start. You were always an alpha, like even and as you got older, and you were dating a mutual friend of ours, and we used to, shout out to him, but we used to jab at him how you used to punk him all the time and
Oh
stuff
my
like that because you
God.
were alpha. You were alpha. He gonna appreciate this.
I
I'm not
can't
gonna say his
stand
name. He
you
gonna
right
appreciate.
now, Ty. So
We used to punk him all the time. Come on, come on. Like I said, I wanted to say certain stories, but we used to get on him all the
I
time. Yo, you gonna let her do
cannot.
that to you?
For,
It's just. Well, listen. I told you. I knew. He didn't know. I knew. I was scared. I was
I
gonna
will
stay in
tell
my
you
corner like,
this.
oh
That was that was my childhood love. That's my dear
yeah,
friend. I love him.
yeah,
Shout out to G. I will say that. Shout out to
yeah,
G. To life, I love him. We to this day we're amazing friends.
yeah,
I truly appreciate our relationship as young people, a teenage
yeah,
love, and then growing
yeah.
into adulthood. I look at it differently, but I was telling someone the other day, I said they used to always say that I would punk him and that he was
See,
whipped. Y'all used to do this thing when I came by, cha-cha, like all of the time. All of the time,
because
you
every
guys would do
time.
that.
Listen, because when you came up the circle, and you came past 908. He knew it was time to go. Like that's what I was saying. I wanted. I was so glad when you wanted to come on, because, like I said, those were just good memories that I wanted to throw out there. That that, hey, yo, we used to make the whipping sound, and he knew it was time to go, and it was all good, but it was all fun, and that was just such a positive, and that's probably shaped me now. When I hear something or I get told something, I'm like, okay, yep, time to go. Like, it
Yeah,
ain't time to play. So
yeah,
no,
yeah.
I appreciate that, and I wanted to make sure that you had definitely a good laugh about that, because there was just so much, and we used to just playfully tease him. Like I
Yeah.
said, I hope he watches it. He knows, we love him, and we used to playfully tease him all the time. Oh, look at the watch. Oh, it's time. It's time for you to go, man. You gotta go. It was almost like being called upstairs for curfew.
You, we had our time together. I will say though,
Yeah.
he didn't. He he put me in my place when I needed to be. Like it was never my intention to be
Nah.
that alpha woman with him, but you learn certain
Yeah.
characteristics and when you can put it down. And Greg always, he respected me, but when it was time to
Yeah.
be
Of
like,
course.
all right, relax a little bit, he'd be like, relax to this day. And we both have our stuff. I'd be like, oh man, you're so spoiled. And he'd be like, you're so spoiled. He'd be like, enough, D. That's enough. I'll talk to you later. Happy Friendship Day. Shout out to our friendship day as well. He's a good
That's
person.
what's up. Nah, shout out G. That's what's up. So, were there any particular hangouts outside of going down to Fort Greene and seeing family? But like, were there any particular hangouts in Brooklyn or around the city that you just love to go to? Even in your college years, were there any particular spots that you just love to go to and just chill out and hang out?
Great question. So in my college years, I wanted to go away, but I opted to it was in between. I saw a different world and I was inspired to go to college from a different world. But what wound up happening is I wasn't ready to go away. That wasn't really my reality. I didn't really get prepared to go away earlier on. So I wound up
Right.
going to LIU and I lived on the dorms there. And it was still an amazing experience because a lot of people think just because that dormitory is in Brooklyn that you're limited to just Brooklynites. But in that big
Right.
building right there, and they have now other dormitories all over, it was
You're
just
right.
like very diverse. You learned a lot. Even people that came from different walks of Brooklyn, they weren't like me in my community. So I did a lot within the compounds of that campus, but then I also did a lot in the village. I went to the village a lot. I love
Hmm.
the bridge. I love the promenade. I love going to the city, 42nd Street. Of course, who doesn't love that?
All right.
125th culture. I love the movies. Shout out to the old movie theater on Duffield Street. I was talking about that
Duffield.
the other
That's right.
day. That
Downtown.
movie theater,
Hmm.
the movie theater that is now the church on Fulton Street. Um, it's now a big church. It's the Brooklyn Tabernacle, I think it is, right there on Fulton Street, right off of J Street, a block or two from
Oh,
J.
downtown Brooklyn.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Okay, okay. I know what you're talking
That
about. Yeah.
that movie theater there, I remember going with my family. That was one of the biggest events that we did when we went to see Soul Man as a family and at that movie theater. So that movie theater, even just my grandmother worked for the transit authority right there on J Street for many years. She worked there and we would walk back and forth down Myrtle Avenue before Metro Tech was even a thing. People look at Metro Tech
Right.
now. I remember when they broke ground right there and
Yeah,
walking through there with
yeah.
my grandmother and her saying, look, there's a plan 20, 30, 40, 50 years. They're going to be doing this. Like when we talk about the projects being private now, my grandmother was talking about that in the 80s. In the 70s, she was
Wow.
talking about that coming into fruition. So now to see it, it's like, wow. So even coming down Myrtle Avenue was a big thing before all of those stores were there. All of those buildings were there, rather, and it was just all of the local stores.
Yeah, and I remember being in Brooklyn Tech and seeing, like you said, seeing Metro Tech go up from the ground, though, and it was just amazing. Like it was like they was trying to turn it into Manhattan, but Metro Tech was just so nice. You go down there with this. I haven't been down there in years. I want to go down there and see what it looks like now, but it was just amazing to see that, I think Chase was one of the first big businesses that were down. Chase Bank was one
Yes.
of the first big
Yeah.
businesses down there. So,
Sorry, Loon is visiting us.
Metrocheck,
Yes.
yeah, definitely changed. But I also want to give you your flowers, for something else that you don't realize that you did for me. So I want to say my senior year of high school at Brooklyn Tech. You were in the dorms at LIU. I was hoping you brought this up. I was trying to steer you into this question, and you invited me to come down, and I got to see your dorm because your dorm building was almost like Penn Workman ish, the way it was shaped,
Exactly. It
like
was.
Penn Workman. And and you showed me the dorm and you showed me around campus, and you just gave me a reason to stay close to stay close to home. And I had my daughter, and I ended up going to St. Francis, right on the other side of downtown,
Yes.
because you took the time. And LIU was an option, but I wanted to go a little bit further away from Brooklyn Tech, even though I only went to the other side of downtown Brooklyn.
Yes.
But I wanted to give you your flowers, but because of you showed me LIU, and you just said you can have a good experience just being home, and you may not even remember that, but you invited
Oh,
me down. And
see,
so I wanted to give you your flowers, and I didn't finish.
you
Sorry
about
to
to
say I
make the
didn't finish. And
waterworks. You didn't finish what?
but I also wanted to to say thank you, because again, you were such a positive person, and there's a lot of people I'm going to have on, a lot of positivity, but you were just always a positive person in my life, in my siblings' life, in the life of a lot of people in Boulevard that you may not even have realized that you touched. And even though 90% of us, 95% of us probably scared of you, but through that fear, we learn to respect, and we learn to love and cherish you, and thank you. And like I said, you're definitely one of Boulevard's finest, from top to bottom, and you definitely represent the housing project well. And that's why, again, I wanted to have you on, and tell you truth and speak about growing up Brooklyn, and then also share some stories. So before I let you go, um, tell us what you got going on, what you got coming up. I know you got some big things planned for 2024, but let me go ahead and give you the floor, and tell everybody what you got coming up, what's coming up with Darlene Anderson.
Thank you. Well, I want to say, like, the waterworks almost came. I appreciate you for saying that. And when you mentioned it, I did remember. Um, that's what it's about. And just going back to community and stuff, like, you extend yourself, you help people that you grew up with. Like, our parents come from a time much more close knit than us, where you help one another. You're my brother, you're my sister. I'm going to show you and expose you to different things. And if you need to call me, I'm available. That's what it's about. And for you to remember that and share that with me, it really touches my heart. And I appreciate you for that. Um, Speaking to that, what I'm doing now, there are a couple of things. So, as you opened up with, I am doing things. I am an author. My book is titled Not Without a Fight, 10 Ways to Win When It Appears You've Already Lost. I'm a personal and professional development consultant. I'm also a philanthropist. I love my community. I am an independent contractor for the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities in New York State. So I help to educate people and their families, individuals and families, on their various services through OPWDD, and help them to get connected with those services. A lot of people in our communities, Black and brown, they don't know about that. So this helps me be that young Darlene that you spoke about, like, that's just exposing people. I've helped a lot of people. There is so much money. This is Medicaid funding. It's not coming out of anybody's pocket. If your child has an IEP, there is no reason, and you live in New York State, why you are not connected with the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities and you have Medicaid. And also, if you have a developmental disability and you don't have Medicaid, you're eligible for Medicaid, because it is a waivered
Wow.
service that doesn't even look at your income for children specifically because of the developmental disability. So your mom and dad could be a judge and the other one can be a doctor, and a child can still have Medicaid just based on a developmental disability. So I invite people to learn more about that. At the end of the day, I say, God's going to provide for me as it relates to clients for what I love to do, personal and professional development work. But this is something that I'm passionate about as a New Yorker and a Brooklynite. So yeah, and you can find all of that on my website, Darlene's Utopia, Darlene A. Anderson. I'm on all forms of social media, Darlene A. Anderson. My YouTube page, which I'm really excited about. We've been up for 10 plus years. with a lot of old things that I've done. I feel like I am in this day and age at 47, I'm now starting to say, okay, I am an influencer and I am a personality, right?
Yes.
I had a hard time saying that before, but there are measurements of how I help to inspire people. So you got to say what it is. You say it humbly, right? So I am a
Right.
motivator. I am an influencer. So I've done a lot of great things as it relates to relationships on YouTube, DU's Conversation Series. I also do entrepreneurial conferences, the Making of Moguls, and I had a podcast, the Power Zone with DU. All of that is on YouTube. And now I am doing Motivational Mondays, Work Wednesdays, and Focus Fridays. And they can check out
Wow.
those clips as well. So yeah, all of that is on YouTube. Yep.
Okay, and we will be sure to share all of that, in the on our YouTube when we post this. We'll be sure to share all of your links. I'll get all your information for you. But again, I want to thank you for coming on. I wanted to give you your flowers. I wanted to make you laugh and admit that I was scared of you as a kid and
Oh,
just have an over. I'm never gonna let you forget that.
I'm
But I
glad
wanted
you
to,
ended it when I was sweet. People know that I was sweet as well. I did
nah,
a
you are
lot of
no.
charity work.
No, no. Listen. I said that to be funny, but no, you almost brought a tear to my eye. Just everything that you talked about being involved in the community, and that's what we need, and that's what our generation. A lot of us are and again, I applaud you because those are things that are needed today. The education that a lot of us our parents didn't get because they didn't have social media or computers, and here you are taking advantage of this, and you're getting that information out there. So again, we'll make sure we share everything out there in all your socials, and please go follow her. We'll get a link to her book out there. Please check it out, and we're going to make sure that we support this Black Queen and continue to give her flowers. So, um, as always, in the podcast, you could have spent your time doing anything in the world, but you spend it with me and us, with Darlene, and I appreciate it. Yo, big up Brooklyn. Yo, we out. Peace.
Absolutely.
The Growing Up Brooklyn podcast is a Black Pharaoh Gaming production.